So we have here Mr. Sir Joey Montemayor. We call him Doctor kasi interesting po. He's both a doctor and a lawyer, so he's a cardiologist. He also has extensive experience on labor laws, so he also has experience writing the labor laws itself. He's a former Assistant Secretary General of Philippine Medical Association. He's the Vice President of the Philippine Association of Government Corporate Lawyers. So very timely po and very relevant po yung experience niya kasi as I mentioned earlier, what we're dealing right now is both a health and a law issue. So best po actually para sa amin yung in terms of content and in terms of speaker, si Sir Joey Montemayor. Thank you po for taking the time po, Sir Joey. We will start soon po.
So yes, guys, thank you again for joining us and good afternoon. So as Lara previously mentioned, we have here Sir Joey, or we'd like to call him Dr. Lee, who will be shedding some lights on different labor laws in play during the new normal. Kasi nga, di ba ngayon, with COVID-19 and the implementation of the ECQ and for some areas, the GCQ, ang daming questions kung ano yung mga laws at play. So yes, I will now hand over the floor, or should I say the screen, to Dr. Joey to talk us through the different new and modified regulations in terms of labor laws.
Thank you very much. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. No? I was thinking yesterday if this is our new normal in conferences, because even in our legal lectures and medical conferences, in fact we started webinar probably last year because of the many delegates in different parts of the country. So before I will entertain questions, I will first give to you the interim guidelines as far as workplace rules set to cut the spread of COVID-19. Please take note that this is the interim rules, meaning they are only enforceable as long as we are in the COVID era or COVID-19. So I will first cite this, then I think you have there in the slides. No? To reduce the transmission of COVID-19, workers and employers, both in the private sector, are mandated to observe strict health protocols as the ECQ or the Enhanced Community Quarantine and the General Community Quarantine shall remain in effect. So it will depend on the area, on the locality of the, not only of the employees, but also of the company or the corporation. In the interim guidelines on workplace prevention and control of COVID-19, this was signed by Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez and Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III. Workers and employers, please take note that both are required to follow total precautionary measures as the country grapples with the containment of the deadly COVID-19. So no one is exempted. Because if we will not be strict in this regard, the impact of contagiousness will be felt all over the country. Okay. Before entering the workplace, all employers and workers must have face masks, both, and it must be worn at all times except only when eating and drinking. I was joking yesterday that even inside your office, do not remove your face mask to prevent you from eating too much. Employer shall provide the appropriate face mask for workers, not individual, but the employers shall provide the appropriate face mask for workers according to the guidelines. All are also required to accomplish, please take note, daily health symptoms form. We have the daily health symptoms form that is downloadable in the DOH and also DOLE website. They should undergo temperature check and have them recorded in the health symptoms questionnaire. So there is that, I think you have that already. Many of you, they have that health symptoms questionnaire. For example, do you experience body weakness? Do you have fever? Do you also have do you experience cough, sore throat, all those signs and symptoms? So all are required to accomplish daily health symptoms, employers and employees. The employer must provide the DOLE through its regional office. So your regional office must be provided. A copy furnished also, DOH, what? The monthly reporting of illness, diseases, and injuries utilizing the DOLE work accident illness report or WAIR form. Please take note, you do not only report symptoms that are referable for a possible COVID, but all illnesses, diseases, and injuries. As a rule, if a worker has a temperature of more than 37.5 degrees centigrade, even after a 5-minute rest, because some people, sometimes they have 37.6, 37, but after 5 minutes, that will automatically decrease by about 1 or 2 degrees. Or if his response in the questionnaire, please take note, needs further evaluation by the clinic staff, meaning if there is doubt in answering the questions, then you may be submitted for this. The person shall be isolated. Please take note, you will be isolated in an area identified by the company. So there is a separate isolation area which is probably far from the workplace and will not be allowed to enter the workplace premises. Another regulation, the clinic staff, if you have one, assigned to assess the worker's health in the isolation area shall be provided the appropriate medical grade, those that are recognized by medical standard. PPE, personal protective equipment by the establishment, which shall include but not limited to face mask, gloves, goggles, and also face shield. So it must be complete. You know for a fact that we have almost 30 doctors, and still there are many in the ICU. Many died of COVID, and while others are still at the ICU. So the clinic staff must be protected also. Disinfection must also be done for equipment or vehicle, please take note, entering the establishment, including facilities and touch objects such as doorknobs and handles at least once every 2 hours. So, meaning even if there is no COVID, disinfection must be maintained. On top of observing at all times physical distancing proper respiratory etiquette, proper coughing, you should take note of that as far as the DOH guideline and disinfection protocols. Eating in communal areas, which was before allowed, now it is being discouraged. And if this is not possible, the employer shall ensure a one worker per table. Please take note, one worker per table and 1 meter distance per worker scheme. So 1 meter distance. Workers are also discouraged to engage in conversation. So walang chismis. As well as prolonged face-to-face interaction with workers, not only with co-workers, but also with clients. Let me repeat that. Workers are also discouraged to engage in conversation as well as prolonged face-to-face interaction with workers and also clients. Establishment visitors. Please take note, the visitors of the company or the office must accomplish the visitors health checklist form, which can be accessed in the DOLE website. Okay, so we will move to meetings. Meetings needing physical presence must also be reduced. This is, as I've said, this is an interim guideline, meaning for the meantime, as long as we have this COVID. Okay, another rule, private establishments are also mandated to implement alternative work arrangement or flexible working arrangement, working hour shifts, work from home where feasible, and on a rotation basis. Okay, so another guideline, if feasible, employers must also provide shuttle services and or decent accommodation on near site location to lessen travel and people movement. A worker suspected of having COVID-19 must be brought to the nearest hospital if needed. Please take note of that. A worker, even if he or she is being suspected only of having COVID-19, without the benefit of testing, he or she will be brought to the nearest hospital if necessary. If, for example, he manifests signs and symptoms of a possible COVID infection. Okay, this also mandate companies to put up what? COVID-19 hotline and call center for employees to report if they manifest symptoms, sore throat, fever, cough, body weakness. I will discuss later the other symptoms, the later symptoms of COVID, which are not covered by the initial rules and regulations. Employers may test workers for COVID-19. May. So it is not mandatory. The rules and regulation state that all employers may test workers for COVID-19. Testing kits used and procured shall be the responsibility of the employer. Please take note, no expenses on the part of the employee or the worker. Most at-risk workers and vulnerable groups. Who are these? Who are these vulnerable groups? Those who are 60 years old and above, meaning senior citizen, with comorbidities or pre-existing, meaning they are not only being considered because of their age, but also some of these senior citizens, they have diabetes, hypertension, they have stage 1, stage 2 cancer, and also those who are immunocompromised, meaning they have other diseases other than those that were stated. For example, they have rheumatoid arthritis or system lupus arthritis or endarthritis. And also, please take note that those who have high-risk pregnancy, these are encouraged from home arrangement only. So they are discouraged from going to the office physically. No? A work agreement is required to be developed by employers which would detail the deliverables from these employees. And please take note, there shall be no diminution or decrease in wages or benefits. So, those were the interim guidelines, meaning they many guidelines in view of the changing pattern of infection of COVID. Many guidelines may be added to this as we go on with the contagiousness of this disease. Now, I would like to state that we are just in the first wave. Unlike South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, or Singapore, they are already in the second wave. Uh, as far as the Philippines is concerned, because we still lack testing kits or testing materials, uh, we cannot conclusively say that we are flattening already the curve. And actually, we have more than 11,000 cases now, with more than or almost 800 deaths. So in that case, we are still lagging behind some countries. Worldwide, we have more than 4 million cases already, and we have almost 300,000 deaths. This June, they say that the United States will go on a 200,000 infections per day. 200 this June, and with 3,000 deaths every day. You see the gravity of our problem, not only in labor that is affecting even food, uh, but also the financial capacity of people to carry on with this disease. So that's it. Those are the interim rules and regulations, and we expect that with the natural process of the virus transmission, there will be more additional rules and regulations as far as limitations of movement in order to prevent COVID-19 infectiousness and contagiousness, and eventually spread to all parts in the Philippines. Uh, while all the labor laws are still enforced, even that in cases of termination of employees, of course, we have the just causes of termination, serious misconduct, willful disobedience, gross and habitual neglect of duty, fraud, willful breach, commission of a crime against the employer or co-employee, and also similar cases or analogous cases. Now, what about authorized causes? Please take note, madalas pong gamitin ng mga kumpanya to. This is a frequent alibi of a lot of companies in order for them to to avoid losses. No? Closure of establishment. No? If there is a final closure of establishment, if there is automation to reduce the number of workers, redundancy, of course, retrenchment, and also disease. Before, disease was included in view of tuberculosis. But now the disease that is being depicted here, it is not just any kind of disease. It must be a serious type of disease. And you know that COVID-19, there are two types of COVID-19. One, the infectious type or the infective type, which is a milder form. And the other form is inflammatory, which is the one who is killing doctors and killing a lot of patients worldwide. So here, uh, the losses must really be established because this cannot be used as an alibi by the company just to terminate employees. So with that, I would like to conclude that all these measures uh, are still deficient. uh, they only involve, I think, 50% of the possible rules, unlike in the other countries where there are strict measures already, in not because of the number of deaths, but because of the contagiousness of the disease. For example, South Korea and Taiwan, they have few fatalities, and yet they are very strict in their implementation. So there you are. I can uh, I can entertain questions, whether medical, legal, and especially labor cases. If you want to, if you are on the managerial side, you may want to you may represent possibly the company, and you are in a quandary if what you will do is in line with the legality of labor practice. So with that, maraming salamat po.
Yes, so thank you so much, Dr. Ni. So before we proceed with the Q&A, so for everyone in the webinar right now who has any questions, so feel free lang po to add them on the chat box. So yes, so Doc, prior to this webinar kasi we started pulling in some questions from our attendees. And yes, as you mentioned, ang dami talagang mga changes, especially now that some areas will be under GCQ. So first things first, Doc, just a question. So yung for example, for staff that was temporarily laid off due to the enhanced community quarantine, kailangan po ba nila na i-report to sa DOLE?
Well, all suspension or holding of work schedules must be reported within 30 days. Within 30 days after the suspension of work, it must be. This is mandatory. Otherwise, companies will be penalized by DOLE. They may pay huge amounts because this is mandatory. Mandatory reporting, whether you suspend, you took disciplinary measures, you have to report that to DOLE, specifically the regional office where that company is located, the main office.
All right. So, ganun. For that, in terms of resignation naman po, Doc, like for example, if yung employee mismo yung gustong mag-resign dahil, for example, no work, no pay dahil nga skeletal workforce yung company nila, does the employer have the right to refuse yung resignation nila po?
Well, it depends. It will depend on the reason. For example, the reason is health. For example, he or she manifests signs of being infected, whether he or she was tested already, then that is excused. Uh, resignation without a proper basis cannot be allowed because many companies, and if that employment is very crucial in running the business, for example, manufacturing, sometimes they just want to resign because of fear fear of being infected. That cannot be allowed because this is based on contract. And you cannot just disregard the contract between the company and the employee, between the employer and the employee. So in that case, only in very serious cases of, for example, disease, uh, for example, confinement, hospitalization because of COVID. And if it is not COVID, the excuse must be that the disease is in the, cannot or may not allow him to perform effectively. So ordinarily, just a particular reason cannot be allowed except only in those exceptional circumstances.
All right, all right. Tapos naman in terms of employment status, kasi nga you mentioned earlier that for termination to be considered just cause, so closure of business is one thing. So what if po doc, temporary closure of businesses? So hindi nila kaya ma-pay yung full wages. Is it okay ba to place the staff under floating status or retrench their employment?
Well, that is generally that is not allowed. That is not allowed because this is based employment is based on contract. Now, only in exceptional cases, for example, during COVID, the employer uh, must coordinate with the employees that will be that to suspend their work for the meantime. But there must be mutual agreement. The employer cannot just unilaterally suspend and hold employment. This must be done mutually, explaining to the employees that we are incurring or we may incur a lot of losses, and also the contagiousness of COVID. That is why we are suspending operations. But they cannot do that unilaterally. There is a requirement that there must be notice first, and also meeting between the employees and also the employer. There must be mutual agreement, and if employees agreed, then they can suspend work for the meantime.
Okay, so tapos yung notice period po naman, Doc, does it necessarily have to be 30 days prior, 1 week prior, or at least may certain time frame ba, po ba?
Well, that is in the law. That is mandatory 30 days. And it cannot be because in order for the law to be changed, the legislative department must change the rules in the DOLE. Now, because there was still no change, what is enforceable is still the 30-day notice. And if they want to remove employees from work, there must obey the two notice rule. First, notice to the ground for the removal, the grounds for the removal, then hearing, and also notice why he or she was being removed, whatever the reason. So they have to follow due process in removing, even temporarily suspending employment, because the family of the not only the employee or the worker but also his family is at stake. Especially now, people are in dire need of support.
Okay po. So, Doc, meron po tayong question from Miss Jerry Gonzalez. So, nagtanong po siya, for example, yung staff nila is COVID-19 positive. So, ngayon nasa nag-home quarantine siya. Is it okay to allow him or her to work? Kahit work from home setup lang po while nag-home quarantine siya?
Well, there is no barrier as far as work from home is concerned, as long as his or her symptoms will allow her. For example, 80% of COVID positive, they only manifest mild symptoms. For example, sore throat, fever, uh, mild fever. Please take note that fever is 37.8 as far as medicine is concerned. But here, it is 37.5. Now, if those symptoms, just to inform you, there are three stages: asymptomatic, presymptomatic, and also symptomatic. Those who manifest signs and symptoms. Now, uh, if he or she is in the asymptomatic, no manifestation yet of symptoms, and also in the presymptomatic stage, which is very difficult to detect, then they can work at home. No hindrance in allowing them, because the company anyway will pay them even if they are not physically present in the company.
Okay, okay. So that makes sense. Thank you po, Doc. And then we have another question from Mr. Paulo Valeriano. Nagtanong po siya, what if yung employee mismo yung gustong magpa-test ng COVID-19 kahit wala siyang symptoms? Pwede ba or compelled ba yung company to conduct the test?
Well, that is better, because testing of COVID is very expensive. Now, if I am the employee, you have to take advantage of that. Do not fear of being positive or negative. Better if you are positive and you are asymptomatic, and just by drinking a lot of fluids, juices, eh, you can combat COVID. Well, the law said, or the rule said, that the employee may, meaning even if employees are manifesting symptoms, it is discretionary on the part of the employer. Now, the employer, if if the employer wants to test everybody, well, you have to take advantage of that. It is better to, because the COVID testing is very expensive also. So he is allowed, because although he may not, because of lack of probably money or financial accommodation, then even with symptoms, he may not request for testing.
Mm. So kung ganun, Doc, for example, ako yung employee, kahit wala akong symptoms, gusto kong magpa-test. So, pwede ko ba i-force mismo yung company na to provide testing, or is this something na parang they'll have to mutually agree on? Kasi as you mentioned before, it's purely the discretion of the company whether or not they're going to conduct testing for their employees.
The employee cannot force the employer, because the law said the employer may, it is silent as far as the employee. So the employee cannot force the employer to force them, or to give them whether rapid testing or the serological immunological testing for COVID-19. So in that case, the employee cannot, no, he may opt to have this test outside.
Okay, okay. Sige po, Doc. Next naman po, Doc, this is kind of like a mix of the questions posted by Miss Cristina Coriano, Miss Venus Vocal, and Miss Marie Grace de Guzman. So this basically this talks about mostly the employment status. So for example, sa kasi in terms of industry, grabe talaga yung pag-hit sa mga hotels or F&B natin. So since they're not yet allowed to operate, tapos yung iba naka-forced leave, kahit ECQ is lifted naman, di naman lahat na mga hotels yung pwede mag-ooperate. So ang daming loss of revenue. So with this, can they retrench them during this period?
Retrenchment must be valid. Must be valid. If there is a repeated refusal on the part of the employee, then it is not just an authorized cause, that is a just cause. If the employee by himself or herself refuse to to work, then the employer has no other option but to terminate, because that is actually willful disobedience. Especially if he is not or she is not COVID positive or has no symptoms, but he refuses on the ground that she fears that she may be infected, that is not a valid reason. So in that case, uh, he can or she can be notified by the employer for possible termination, because you know there are a lot of also people who wants to work but cannot work. But here, it is the reverse. The hotel or any other company may want them to work but they refuse. So in that case, it may shift the reason from an authorized cause to a just cause. So be very careful of that, because there are a lot of lawyers working for the hotel and waiting for that to happen, and waiting for the time that the employee himself or herself will refuse work. So in that case, they can convert the authorized cause for a just cause for termination.
Mm. Okay, so what if naman po, Doc, let's say high risk yung staff, or ano naman, probationary high risk, tapos di siya nakapasa sa evaluation during the period of ECQ, given that no proper training was made. Pwede ba i-terminate yung employment or contract nila?
Well, if it is still within the contract, you cannot terminate, especially now with COVID, because please take note that if it is vague, if uh, if it cannot be determined who is correct among the two, please take note that labor laws will be interpreted and implemented in favor of the worker. So even though he or she is a probationary employee, he cannot just be terminated. It must also follow the just and the authorized cause within the probationary period of employment. But after the probationary employment, the if the determinations that he is not capable, then that is a valid reason for the employer.
All right. So in terms of contract naman daw, kasi you mentioned nga na dapat within contract, or at the end of the day the contract must still be followed unless nga yung mga just causes is already seen or evident. So what if po like yung mga contractual workers, so yung end ng contract nila is, let's say, April, but during that time ECQ pa yung Metro Manila, will the contract still be considered fulfilled, or
No,
kahit may mga ayas
no,
pa daw?
we have already although it is probationary, even if it is under contract, please take note what we have already a lot of jurisprudence extending probationary. For example, if in their evaluation, he cannot or she cannot be properly evaluated, then there can be extension of probationary employment. Sometimes they extend it to another 2 months, some 4 months, some 6 months. But there is already a jurisprudence that you cannot just, even with this kind of crisis, you cannot just terminate the employment of a probationary employee. This should be in his favor by extending him another 2 or 4 months, whatever the choice of the employer, in order to evaluate. But you cannot just terminate the probationary employee because it is ECU and there was already the probationary contract is already finished. No, you cannot do that because the jurisprudence is very clear that in case where there are exigencies of conditions, probationary employment must be extended to really evaluate if that employee is capable or can be qualified as a regular employee.
All right, makes sense. So Doc, eto naman po, follow up regarding the retrenchment of employment. So, what if po walang refusal from the side of the employee? In fact, gusto nilang magtrabaho, kaso nga, because of the current ECQ and GCQ, this industry or company is not allowed to operate. So, these employees can't return to work. So, pwede ba sila i-retrench due to this?
No, they cannot, because if the prohibition comes from a rule in the government, for example, ECQ, and for example, it is enhanced or even extended uh, quarantine, then they cannot just be refused employment, because if the prohibition is coming from a higher one like the government, then the employer cannot use that as an excuse to refuse employment to the employees, especially if they want to, after the crisis, they want to work. They cannot just do that because the reason is a government regulation. In that case, the decision must be in favor of the employee.
All right. So if that's the case po, Doc, can they offer or can the company offer rather unpaid leave for let's say up to 6 months if ever? Kasi sa law wala daw yung hindi na mention yung mga unpaid leave. So is this illegal or is this legal?
Well, if you look at the contract, because they have their own contract, every company look at the contract, what as far as unpaid leaves. Uh, some companies are very clear on that, and if those are mutually agreed upon, then they have to follow uh, what is the possible outcome. For example, those will remain unpaid because the company is actually in a serious business losses. So in that case, even Article 286 of the Labor Code allows the employer not to pay, especially in serious business losses. We know for a fact that uh, 95% of companies are actually in serious business losses because of this COVID-19.
Okay. Tapos, in terms of like, for example, kasi ngayon, modified enhanced community quarantine na tayo, so meron ibang businesses who are allowed to operate. So what if po, given the circumstance, let's say in 2 or 3 weeks time, may employee na nag-show ng symptoms or di kaya nag-test ng positive for COVID-19. So until where is the responsibility of the employer in terms of yung medical or hospital bills nila. So aside from of course PhilHealth who will shoulder a certain amount depending on the seriousness of their disease, how or gaano ka grabe yung responsibility ng company to the employee who tested positive?
Well, the employers are encouraged to help employees, especially those who suffered a lot, and especially if the confinement is so long, for example, 2 months at the ICU, then the employer is not forced, but is being encouraged by the interim rules to provide also help to the employee. Not only that, they have unions. No? The union may within their capacity provide also assistance to the employee who suffered or employee who died of COVID. There are a lot of expenses also. For example, the employee died. Uh, Cremation is very expensive. It is more than 30,000. So we have a lot of also use of chemicals in order for cremation. So in that case, although there are no explicit rules for the employer to support the employee, he is being encouraged. No? Outside of the other benefits that the employee will receive within his employment. So in that case, even the rules manifest itself that encouraging employers to support sick employees, especially those who are sick because of COVID-19.
Thank you, Doc.
Okay. Sige, thank you po.
Lara here, guys. We'll just remind we have 10 minutes remaining. So we'll wrap it up. Throw your questions already on the chat box. We also have a succeeding webinar after this. We'll send an invite similar to what we did last time. So I suggest everybody to place in their questions already in the chat box. If we don't get to answer your questions by today, we'll make sure to answer them on our next succeeding, or we'll respond na lang to your chat or to your question on the chat box. Thank you.
Meron po akong meron po akong free online check-up free online check-up, Dr. Atty. Joey Montemayor. So I welcome all those. Kunyari check-up ng wala silang because they have limited movement. They cannot go just to any clinic. I accept free online check-up kung ano man ang health concern nila. Even hypertension, heart attack, stroke. I am a cardiologist also.
Sige po. Thank you, Doc. Yes, so just to wrap it up, we have our a question by Sarid Zidro. I think for this one, Doc, this is right around your area of expertise. So Mr. Zidro is asking, so provided what has been said that the ECQ time should not be a basis to assess probationary employees, are they supposed to give an extension contract for the probationary? So is that allowed by the law provided by the circumstances? And for this, he's referring to the Labor Advisory 14 for the clarification of the non-inclusion of the ECQ period on the 6-month probationary period.
Okay. Kagaya po ng nasabi ko, we have already jurisprudence because some employers, they even if there's a valid reason, they did not extend probationary employment. But the Supreme Court said in all cases that probationary contract can be extended if there is no clear basis for evaluating. So in many cases, probationary employment were extended in order for the employee to fully and completely evaluate the employee by the employer. So yan po, pwede na-extend po yan, ina-extend yan. Yung iba, yung iba 2 months, 4 months, so it will depend. But ECQ, very clear in the guidelines, should not be considered one to eliminate or terminate the employee once his contract is already finished. So there must be extension. That is mandated by the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court. Ang mismo Supreme Court, sinabi niya na i-extend pa kasi there can be no proper evaluation. For example, in cases like this, COVID. So, mag-extend pa po yun ng another 2 or 4 months o depende sa mutually agreed by the probationary employee and also by the employer. So, pwede pong i-extend yun.
Sige. So, thank you po, Doc. Eto, Doc, regarding naman for pregnant women, kasi diba, they are not allowed to go physically to work kasi nga high risk siya. But because their industry is allowed to operate during that time, and her role is very important, so they'll need to actually replace her. So does the company have, or does the company need to pay a separation pay, or pwede lang siya i-terminate yung contract? Or what's the process for this po?
Well, for ordinary pregnancies, the rules are very silent. No? But also, nakalagay dito, for those high-risk pregnancies, meaning pregnancies, the mother has concomitant also hypertension. Many mothers also, they have diabetes. They can also work only from home. Pero those ordinary pregnancies, uncomplicated, they are allowed. They can work also in the company, especially if that work is very crucial for the company's business. So because there is actually no in utero transmission of COVID. There was no yet report. So what is being provided po na by the rules is high risk pregnancies, meaning pregnancies yung nanay may alta presyon, merong cancer. Yung ibang may mga pasyente kami may cancer, may buntis pa siya. Tapos merong diabetes. So these are high risk pregnancies of which the DOLE or the rules provides that they should work only from home. Yun lang po. No? Pero yung iba, they cannot just terminate these employees. Yung mga ano naman, ordinary pregnancies, they can participate in a rotating skeletal force. For example, they can just work two to three times a week. For example, secretary lang naman yan. Wala namang yan. But of course, they will be discouraged from doing heavy burden work. So, yan po, no? What is being discouraged here, going to the company, are those pregnancies who are high risk pregnancies.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. For the last question, this one is actually very common sa mga nag-submit ng questions before. So, with regard to hazard pay po, is it mandatory for employers to provide this, especially if they require their employees to report on site? And if so, how much yung rate? Kasi diba, for example, for overtime pay, there's 15 to 20 or 10 to 20% overtime or night differential. So how about for hazard pay po? Meron bang
wala po, actually hanggang ngayon wala pang fix rules ang DOLE, no? Pero as far as ewan ko lang, no, kasi it is still in the management prerogative also. It is on the prerogative of the employer but if you will base it in other countries, for example, United States, 2 to 3 times ang hazard pay nila sa kanilang ordinary wage. So here in the Philippines, the rules and the laws are silent, but the employer is encouraged of giving all the benefits. For example, yung mga delivery men, no, masyadong mataas ang risk niyan. For example, yung mga nagde-deliver ng mga pagkain, for example, yung mga LL.B, yung mga M.B.A, yung mga maraming mga nagde-deliver ng mga ganyan, very high ang risk talaga nila. So, in the exposure, for example, it is not only face-to-face or within distance communicability. As far as the scientific research is concerned, COVID-19 can be transmitted more than 27 feet from coughing, or kung medyo inubo, more than 27 feet can be transmitted. So in that case, hazard pay should be mandated. So I do not know why they put so much protection on the employer. So this kind of, it will also on the type of job, no? Where there is high risk. In that case, they should be given. In the United States, I think they give 2 to 3 times the usual pay that they give.
Okay. Thank you po, Doc. This one, for the last question, from Miss Danica Cabo. So, she has an auntie who will be coming back from Dubai. So, for this, will she need to stay in the quarantine center for 14 days, considering that she will need to maintain her dialysis medication? Or can they opt to confine her in, let's say, a health facility? Or is this something they have to consult with her employer?
Nagda-dialysis.
Ano po, Doc?
Is she undergoing dialysis?
Miss Danica, for this, according to her, she needs to maintain lang po her dialysis medication. And yes, she is undergoing.
Yes, because that kidney diseases are very high risk patients, ano. So in that case, they have to be placed in quarantine, mandatory 14-day quarantine for all traveling, especially in this kind of patients. Uh, they have kidney problems or possible other, for example, kidney problems, they have also hypertension. Sometimes they have diabetes. So I would suggest that not to go in some other place, but direct to the hospital. And that is considered also of a certain form of quarantine. If you go direct to the hospital, be confined then for 14. Anyway, you are undergoing treatment. So in that case, that will be beneficial to her.
All right. So for this kailangan niya ano 'di ba, mag-consult or to have this prepared by her employer in Dubai, is that correct?
Well, pwede po yan, no? But some other patients are, we just support them. For example, in my case, I just give permission to the patient. Binibigyan ko lang sila ng certification that she may be exempted for government's isolation, but she has to go direct to the hospital. So the doctor here can give the proper instruction to the patient.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Miss Danica, I hope that answered your question. So, guys, we are wrapping up the webinar for today. So, we will be also sending you a recording of today's webinar via email and also details for the next one, as well as a link to Sir Montemayor's Facebook. That way, you guys can also take advantage of the free consultation.
Thank you, Cheska. Thank you, Cheska. Thank you, Doc. I would like to thank first all the people who made this webinar possible. Thank you so much also to Dr. Ni. I think it was how you answered the question was very helpful to our audience. We're very much looking forward to our next webinar. I think we have unanswered questions on the chat box and on the pigeonhole. So I'm sure the next webinar will be as helpful also for our audience. We'll be looking at sending the invites by this week. So please watch out for that. Thank you so much for everyone who also came. I know you guys are also busy. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to help you as well. So this is FastJobs. For those who are not familiar, we connect employers to non-executive job seekers. Some of our people might connect you, or if you need our help as well, please feel free to message us for all the recruitment needs that you have as well, or for the next webinar if you have other questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Doc.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll just, and then we will exit in a bit. Thank you, guys. I hope everybody's learned something from today.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
thank you very much. Sure po. Welcome. So, ulitin po ha. May next pa po kami.
Sige, thank you.
Okay po. Thank you.